Welcome everybody. I'll keep this whole session in English, so I'd like to get started. Today I will try to solve a mystery. You see, something strange is going on in Israel. And the purpose of this session is finding out how exactly do they do it. I have the great honor of introducing to you Avi Nir, who is the CEO of Keshet Media Group. And Keshet Media Group is a very unusual place. When I first called people in Israel to talk about Avi, they were like, "Are you interviewing Avi?" I quickly realized what an important person he is and what a fantastic television station this is. Some people say that he's a quasi-mythological figure in Israel, in Israeli television, Avi. Yes, quasi-mythological. Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, has just come out with a list of the most influential cultural people in Israel, and Avi was number one. Let me just ask you guys, how many of you have seen Homeland? How many of you know that it comes from Israel? And how many don't? Oh, that's good. Then it's going to make a very interesting session. Avi is executive producer of the American series Homeland as well. He is the CEO of one of the most successful and unusual broadcasters in the world. He doesn't sleep very much. Like Margaret Thatcher, 3 or 4 hours a day. He says he falls asleep when his head hits the pillow. So I guess you don't worry too much. His wife is a psychologist, and she keeps telling them that he wouldn't watch the programs if he wasn't boss. And he says it's a lie. Let me just show you why there's a mystery going on. Everyone knows that main channels, main broadcasters are having a difficult time all over the world. But let's just look at Keshet's ratings and share. Now, maybe it's also unusual, but Avi has been with Keshet since 1993, so he's been there for 20 years. And he got to the point of being CEO in 2002. And you see how the share has grown steadily since 2004 in primetime average rating. Let's see the share. It's gone up from 30 to 42.3%. Let's see the next one. This is making Keshet the biggest broadcaster in Israel measured in primetime average share. And the next one. Very close to the next channel, Reshet, which is incidentally a funny construction. Keshet is I think I had a talk with Avi yesterday, and he said there's a personality split in his organization. And you can say the broadcaster has a bit of a personality split as well, because Channel 2, where Keshet is broadcasting its programs, it runs like this. Keshet Media Group is running the channel from, I think now it's Sunday to Wednesday? Tuesday, Sunday to Tuesday. And then another group, Reshet, is running it from Wednesday to Saturday. And then they change every so often. And you're changing in 2 months? In 2 months. January. So it's kind of an unusual setup. Let's just go to the next one. One of the things that struck me, and you've probably all heard about Israel being a power television hub, it's actually incredibly impressive. There are 8 million people that are about the size of Jutland, and they're doing really well in exporting not just scripted formats, but non-scripted as well. These are a list of series that have been picked up by American networks. It's a very impressive list. And we'll get back to Homeland later on. Let's see the next one. And non-scripted formats are going really, really well as well. Maybe you know some of these. Maybe you are going to see them soon. But some of these formats have been sold to 18 countries. And it's not just any country. Some of them are running on big US stations, some on ITV2, some on NBC. So there's a great impact of Israeli ideas in scripted and non-scripted formats. Let's see the next one. There's another very unusual thing about Keshet as well. They're expanding. and they're expanding internationally. And I was really surprised when I read that Keshet had opened production companies in Canada, in the UK, and in Australia. I don't know if I'm saying too much, but I think you have plans of opening other places as well. You can get back to that, Avi. So here's a broadcaster. It's only broadcasting half the week on the channel. It's spreading out internationally. It has smash hits, winning Emmys and Golden Globes. It's diversifying into production. So these three shoot-offs are going to sell the slate of 50 to 60 formats that Keshet has in its slate. And they're going to produce it as well. And one of the last deals I read about was a deal with China, where 6 of the formats, you've made a deal with them, as far as I could read. That's not the only thing. They've created this website, Mako, which in 3 years has become the 3rd biggest website in Israel. And they have, and Keshet is cooperating with tech startups within this entertainment industry, and you can see a number of them down there, because the strategy is to fill out, be everywhere, be in many countries and on many, many platforms. And as opposed to all the other broadcasters that we hear about all the time, the ratings go up. So, how do they do it? Stephen Lambert speculated a bit about this, and he said, let me quote him, if I can find it. He said, it must be something in the, let me see what he said. He said something like, it must be something in the Israeli water, something you're drinking. Another guy said, well, we feel an urge in Israel to leave some sort of mark, even as ethereal as a television show, before the Iranian bomb drops and proves our Jewish paranoia fully justified. So there's another theory, it's the Yiddische Mama. So, many theories. Today, I hope we'll solve the mystery. And here, what is it they're doing? How come they do such brilliant development work? How come they have these expansionist plans? And I've asked Avi to come, and he's going to make a presentation. So, it's going to work like this. We didn't want this session to look like anybody else's session, did we, Avi? So he's going to give you a speech about his philosophy of television, and after this speech, you're going to see clips from different shows, and we're going to talk about how they did them, how they developed them, how they became so successful. So, please, Avi.
Thank you, Thomas. And I should thank the internet company we've hired to put all these wrong information for you to read. Good job. I'll have to pay them a big bonus for that, but it was worth it, I think.
They paid me.
Okay. Okay. That was easy. Okay. We have these companies, we're doing all this kind of disinformation and misinformation. So again, thank you very much, and thank you for having me here. And it was actually fascinating to have the conversation with Thomas yesterday and some conversations on the phone. And it made me think about what I want to say and actually think of what we're doing, which we rarely stop and think of what we're doing. And the beginning of the conversation was when Thomas was in the phone, I think, was insisting on understanding the system. And as the conversation went along, I said, okay, there is the system, but I think more importantly than the system, there is this era of, or this layer of the psychology. So, talking about models and creative models, and I'll get to Israel in a moment, is interesting and fascinating, and I heard a few lectures here. But the thing that most people who are talking about these models don't touch upon is about the people who actually do this. And all these models of creativity in television assumes that we are intelligent, rational people, which we aren't. And most of these models are dealing with the kind of what ecosystem you create in order to create creativity. And the real problem is not the ecosystem, but rather the ego system or the ego system. And how do you deal, and the more I dealt with it, is how do you deal and how do you harness all these egos in order to create great television. So I would say that the thing to remember as managing or directing a TV organization or any creative organization, especially TV, is assuming people are irrational and taking into consideration the egos and the irrational aspect of it. And being in Copenhagen and Denmark, I would say, you know, it's not that a problem you can solve by coming to Hamlet and telling him, look, dude, there's a very logical solution to all this. No, there's no logical solution. People have egos. You have to work with the egos, and you have to understand how to put them all together. So I will try to talk on one hand of very about data and models. On the other hand, I will talk some psychology, and it's not only because my wife is here. I think this is the reality of our profession. And I think we too often tend to forget it. So bear with me. It will take about 25 minutes, I think. And I will tell you that there is a good ending to this. It will look very bad in the beginning, but there's a good ending, so there's something to wait. There's light at the end of the tunnel. Please wait. So, and another thing, another promise. You know, we're on TV, we're in promos, and promos are always better than the real stuff. I will tell you also this, that being in television in this day and age, I think is the best time ever to be in television. I think what I will describe in a minute as the worst of times is actually the best of times for television. And I think the best of times came from television because it went through supposedly and technically the worst of times. So technology, which was the biggest maybe threat on television, I believe became the best ally of television. Okay, so let's start off and see the first, what is the vision of the world, or what is the vision of the media of the world as we see it. And, you know, people in television have, you know, they don't have politics, they don't have other, they look at competition, they look at ratings, and so we are. And look, let's move for the next one. And what happened, I think in recent years, and this is redundant, we all know it, but I don't believe we all take into consideration what it means for all of us, is what happened to the media competition in the media, and what happened, I believe, has a very deep influence on the creative aspects. Usually, most people look at it as a technical problem, but I would say it's not a media problem. I would call it's a matrix problem. And what is the matrix? This is the matrix, the next one. The matrix means that when you have all these media, our consumer, our viewer, has the choice to choose when, where, and what to watch. Now, you might suspect, or you might feel in your everyday life, that this is the worst thing to happen to broadcasters. I don't know, how many of you are broadcasters? Many. So this is supposedly bad for ratings, is it? Supposedly. In many instances, it is bad for the ratings. But I feel it created something that changed the way we think of television, of creative television. And another thing, and this is on touching on a psychological aspect as well. I think that we're in the business that changes every 2 or 3 years. There is no business in the world that changes as rapidly as the media changes. And this puts some kind of pressure, but it's more than pressure. For me, it's a kind of endeavor. It's a life goal to compete in the matrix. If you're not very dynamic organization, and that refers to some of the strange things that Thomas has pointed out, if you're not there, the matrix will kind of consume you. You'll be disappearing in the matrix. So this looks like a very dire future for our business. And now, see what I have to say about the audience. It will make it even harder. This is our audience. You know, our audience is is not the way they used to be. Because in the past, our audience would sit at night and watch television. Watch the television we as broadcasters would give him. Not with this attention deficit disorder. They have these options, and they are very, very used to using all these options. I don't know how about your kids, but my daughters, I rarely get them to watch television, linear television. This is very, very hard. They watch it in very, very strange places. They will watch it usually when their dad is not in the room, or they'll throw him out of the room, in their room, in other rooms, walking in the whatever they want to. But the usual way, the linear way of watching television has almost disappeared. And all these changes in the audience and changes in the media have occurred when there's a very, very interesting change in creativity. If you look at let's talk only about American television at the end of the 90s, that was the end of many, many big shows we know, like Seinfeld, Friends, ER. That was the demise of a big, big kind of golden age for television. My statement is that we're in the midst of the second and better golden age of television, and that was the big crisis of television that took place for some years. In these days, if you look at the Emmys, by the way, you have your Emmys awards tonight? Tomorrow night? You had it yesterday? Tomorrow. Okay. We'll come back to that later. But if you look at the Emmys these years, the shows that won the Emmys were not half as good as the show that win the Emmys these years. And I'm not talking Homeland only. I'm talking about any other shows. But that was the decline of television and at the end of the 90s. And something happened when the competition grew stronger and stronger. Television became better and better through cables, and now I believe it will go also to networks around the world. So there is a big flood of content options, and supposedly it's a dire future for the business. And the thing that we know as broadcasters is that and this is something extremely important now, that there is an expiration date for the validity of our shows. Because the competition is so strong, because there are so many options, if they don't watch your show immediately, this evening, or in the next few hours, their options are so many that they will not watch your show again. They will not come back to your show again. And this all threatens the business models of the broadcaster. So what does a broadcaster do in this when the expiration date is the same night? Why will they watch his shows? It looks like a very cruel world for broadcasting or for creativity. You have to make it work, and you have to make it tonight. But then, if we go for the next one, there is the social media and the internet. And 5 years ago, we had a big brainstorming session in Keshet, and we thought, what are we going to do with this big threat of the internet? There's nothing we can do about it. It's too strong for us. It took us a few hours to understand, again, 5 years ago, that it can be a great opportunity to us. It's not only a great threat, it can be a great opportunity, because the social media is the biggest water fountain in the world. And the social media can allow people to interact and talk about the shows. But there's only one problem. Your shows must be worth talking about. So if you're doing a show for couch potatoes, if you're doing a shows which will be just sitting and watching the show with no real and no very, very strong emotional aspect to them, the social media will kill them, because it will ignore them and they will disappear. But on the other hand, if your show, even if it's small, will have a creative edge, if your show will have a unique voice, if your show will have this kind of resonating power, social media is a great friend. Social media can enhance your show. So social media, looking at it from both point of views, one of them is merely the promotional point of view, which says we can promote the shows on the social media. But I think the most important thing is it's not that aspect, it's the other aspect. Social media is a benchmark of creativity. If a show is not mentioned in the social media, it does not exist, it is not worth producing, it's not worth creatively, because it didn't echo within the minds of the viewers. It's just there. It's just sitting there like a dinosaur. If a social media echoes, it exists. If it echoes in the social media, it is a good show, it exists. So it's a kind of a benchmark. It's a kind of a measure for the quality of the show, and not only a promotional vehicle. So you can look at these figures and say that, and understand that TV is the #1 subject in social media. This is a great tool if you want to use it, but it's not saying put lots of money in the marketing people in the social media. This is not the message. The message is totally different. Look for what is really, really happening in the social media. Look for what shows really create this. And this is I think this is the key of creativity, and this is for us one of the elements or the benchmarks of how do we look for other and new shows. And it works from both. I will concentrate, and most of our examples will concentrate on scripted shows, but it works both on scripted and unscripted shows, and we can talk about it later if you want. So I won't go into depth about the Nielsen studies, but you read the Nielsen studies, and sometimes most people, I believe, misread them about the social media dealing with these shows. It's not that they're dealing with the shows; they're dealing with good shows. They're dealing with shows that have a specific voice that really resonate. So, you can go and we can go for the next one and say that the rule would be the creative rule, not the creative rule would be, if they don't share it, spare it. But how do you know they will share it? How do you know they'll share the show? Again, not by paying this company to put them on the social networks, no. And this is coming from the social networks, coming from the web. It goes all the way back to reading a script, to creativity. What's a shared piece of television? Why will people share it? What are we looking for when we read a script, for a script that will survive in this environment? In this stage in the evolution of television, what will be the survival of the fittest? What will characterize the survival of the fittest? And again, it's very, very different from the past. In the past, when the viewing was, you called the media, you call it here flow?
Flow TV.
Flow TV. Flow or float means that like there is a continuum. It's not this anymore. You don't, and in the past you were looking to shows that will not disrupt the flow or the float. Now, in order to create the shareability of a show, you need something disruptive. Something disruptive disrupts also the flow or the float. So this is a contradiction you have to look for. You don't want, as one researcher in the media called it in the past, the less offensive show. You don't want the masses keep watching your show. You want the masses feel raged, feel in love. You want them feeling something and not being passive. And this is a totally different paradigm that was the big paradigm in the past. And a phrase, I'm an American, what we are looking for most of our shows, again, both reality and scripted, is we talk about the show, we read it, and then we say, okay, it's a good, entertaining show, but is this something more than there? Will people have something to say about the show? And this is a different layer than just doing a real good crafted show. For most procedurals, we don't do procedurals. Procedurals are good entertainment. There's nothing to say about them. Can you say something about procedure? Have you ever discussed a procedure with your friend? Never. So it's good television, it's good craft, but there's something missing there. So, must-speak TV is a television that will evoke something more than good entertainment. We don't always achieve this, but this is what we're looking for. So, the next thing I would say is, so what are we looking for? And this is of course a metaphor for what we're looking for. I was looking for a word that will resonate with you and will explain how do we read scripts and what is our creative process. And my conclusion is, it's all about, even though the voice is not, Keshet doesn't air The Voice, it's on the other station, and we don't like it, of course, but I think it's about the voice, and we are looking for voices that will resonate. Now, these voices, and I'll talk about it later, what they have in common, they're different. There is something in them which you read, and you just know it if you read it carefully. But you, as someone who manages a station or reads scripts, has to be really, really quiet in order to hear this. If you're not quiet, if you hear people saying how smart you are, how good your staff is, how great decisions you've made in the past, you don't hear this very unique voice. And this is the psychology of it. We, being TV people, are very, very talented and smart. All of us, of course. Very successful, talented, and smart. And we're so smart sometimes that we don't hear these unique voices. And the most challenging thing leading a company is to make yourself and make the people who work for you hear when this kind of unique voice is on the air. Sometimes it's weak, sometimes it's strong. I'll show you an example in 15 minutes of something that you start reading it and you say, I don't know what this show's about. It's just a simple family story. No, there's something deeper there. We rarely also do, unfortunately or fortunately, we don't do murder. Our action shows are usually don't exist. It's usually comedies, dramas, but we are looking for something that is deeper and will resonate. Again, we're not always successful, but that's what we're looking for. And again, mechanically, or as the Americans say it, if in the past the Americans were looking for cliffhangers, you know about cliffhangers? No. Don't use the word cliffhangers when you go to Hollywood. What you'll say now is, give me a holy shit moment. Forget the cliffhangers. So what is a holy shit moment? It says, for me, it says, I have to tell it to someone. It's not just, okay, what will happen in the next episode, because the cliffhangers were from soap operas. No, soap operas don't have holy shit moments. You're not allowed to say shit in soap operas. So this is a metaphor for what we're looking for. It's something very, very different. And I heard the presentation from an ad person, and they were saying, we're looking for what the fuck moments. So this is, if you want to use both terms, both very nice language, you can choose which one you want, but they aim for the same. Again, if you're manneristic and you're just doing something extravagant, it won't work. This will have to be something of for me, a personal revelation. And again, I hope to show you some examples. And, these days, it's not a Keshet show, unfortunately, but Breaking Bad it's in its last episodes. And if you go back at the history and read about the ratings of Breaking Bad was a very, very small voice. In only thousands of people watched it. Thousands. Not even hundreds of thousands. And its unique voice went through there. But you have to be, as an executive, you have to be confident, and you have to be trusting your reading instincts and not your past successes. So I would say you know, if I would have been working for an American bestseller, I would say what we're looking for, or the book we would issue, would be, how do you write scripts these days for us? What are we looking for in scripts? And coming back to this idea of golden age of television, if you look at the people who are writing for television now, Jen Champion in doing a show in New Zealand for a US and British network, David Milch, Vince Gilligan, Howard Gordon, many, many others. We are living now in the age of the TV novel. I think the novelists of our days are working for television, and we just have to find these guys. They're there. They are ready to write for television. They'd rather write for television than cinema. I think most of them rather write for television than write books, but we have to find them. And this is our job, to find these guys. Their voices are weak sometimes, but there's something very, very strong in them. And this age of TV novel, or the second golden age of television, for you and for me, is a great opportunity to do this whole process of looking for these guys. So, going back to the Keshet system and how do we do this, we get, and the first thing would be that approximately we have one idea for a show each day in Keshet. Scripted or non-scripted. About 12 will go on the air. Now the hard part is, how do you read these scripts? How do you get these shows? How do you think about them? The hardest part is when you have successful managers having their experience, knowing this will go, this will not work, not really listening and trying to find the resonance in the voice of the creator. This is the hardest problem. Because your creative leaders, the more successful they are, the less they will be listening to other voices, because they will read the first two pages and say, okay, this will never work. I know, we tried it, it will never work. And they don't really appreciate the viewer as they should. And the viewer will appreciate the unique voice if it's there. Because, you know, our experience is our worst enemy, and our success might be our worst enemy if we don't rephrase and really let ourselves read the material and be influenced by the material. This is the worst thing that can happen to us. So, you know, in the American movies, you say, I hear voices. You must have your people hear these voices. You must open your ears and try to see whether you can hear them or not. And then, and only then, you can create something that will be much more than a good TV. And then you'll have probably maybe the best profession in the world, which means doing something which you are proud of. And this is, you know, this is combining the two things I wanted to talk about. On one hand, there are two kinds of egos for TV executives. One of them is the ego which says, I'm number one, I have the ratings, I have the power, I have the money, I make for my company more money, more ratings, we're more successful than the others. This is one ego. The other ego is the creative ego, which is, I'm very, very proud of what we've done. I like it. I want to watch it. I want my kids to watch it. I want it to stay after me. And in the past, there was this idea that you can combine. You're either a professional that's looking for ratings, or you are an artist. And I think at this day and age, the success of these unique shows allows us, and this is something very important, I think, for people who love TV, who appreciate what they do and proud of what they do, to do both. To be successful in ratings, and this is what I try to do, to be successful in ratings and very proud in many, many of the things you do. Can it be achieved? I think with creators from outside, with listening to the voices from outside, it can be achieved because our viewer these days is looking for it. They're looking, the many, many viewers are looking for these voices. So I think this is generally what I had to say. And now Thomas will talk about a few examples, whether I talk bullshit or there's something in this.
Is your wife? Oh, she is. Is he talking bullshit?
Mostly.
Good. Well, why don't you sit down and then let's proceed and see some clips, because I think people are by now probably very curious about your different shows.
Okay.
This thing with disruptive, this thing that you engage and disrupt the viewer, you were talking about making edgy mainstream shows on Keshet. And so they have to be mainstream, but they have to be edgy as well. Now, the first show that we're going to see a clip from, I trust is a comedy.
Yeah.
But as with a lot of other things you're going to see now, there's this strange twist. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but the story goes like this. It's a man, he's living in a marriage with a vile and terrible wife who keeps scolding him. And suddenly he wins $70 million.
Shekels, but it's nice as well.
Okay, 70 million shekels.
$20 million.
And here's the thing in the show. He's trying to keep it a secret from his wife.
He understands that if he divorces her, which is his life endeavor, he will have to give her half of the money.
So why not spend it without her knowing it?
No, but it's a problem to spend it without her knowing it. But the hatred he feels for his wife is so strong that he will harm himself and live with her as someone who doesn't have a penny, just not to give her the satisfaction of giving her half his money.
An evil plot, misogynistic, but let's have a look at it. So this is kind of an evil woman.
No, it's not an evil woman. That's not what it's about. It's about marriage. It's worst. Evil woman is not deep enough. This guy says marriage is hell. And this is this takes it to a different level, because they're both evil. They're both very, very small people. And they both act very, very petty on each other, hating each other. And this is a metaphor of the marriage life, the life of married people.
So this went really well in Israel, this show,
No,
right?
this is just, we just aired a we aired it we did a research on it, but we didn't go all the way to commercial. The focus groups we had on this were the best we had in, 5 years or so.
Okay, so it hasn't been...
No, it hasn't been aired yet.
Okay. You talked about resonance before. What's the resonance here?
The resonance here is saying, look, marriage is a bitch. Many people who are married hate each other, hate their guts. And this is the way it is. Now, this takes it to a different level. But, maybe some people can identify with this. Maybe it exists not only for this guy, but for others as well. So the unique voice here says, no, okay, just jokes, he won the... No, this is about being small. This is about the faulties of men and women. This is not about their best moments in life. This is about their worst moments in life. And we hope that this is, again, this is a creator. We didn't construct it. But when you see this, and you see the actor is actually the writer of the show, and this is something very important. Most of the writers we have are not professional TV writers. They come from a point of view. And he has, don't ask me about his biography, I have no idea, but he has a point of view on this couple. Right. And this is what hopefully will resonate.
Let's see another clip. The next clip we're going to watch is a clip from a series called Arab Labor. It's won a lot of awards in Israel. It's very edgy in the sense that, just to give you some background information about it, there are about 8 million people in Israel, 1.5 million Arabs, and the situation is a little bit like in Denmark. When you have shows on Israeli television with Arabs, the ratings go a bit down. So the Arabs and the Israelis, they don't really watch the same stuff.
No.
So it's a big challenge actually to make, and this was the idea behind this show, to make a show that's predominantly spoken Arab.
Yeah, but
Arabic.
We have some more problems than Denmark, some more. Not many, some more. And the animosity between Israelis and Arabs is I don't need to expand on this. Now, here, this is a show that in Israeli main prime time is 50 to 60% Arabic. The guy who's written it, and this is another example, is an author. He's a well-renowned Arab author. His name is Said Kashua. And his unique voice is saying here, not only, he's saying both. Look at these Israelis and Arabs. They're both assholes. They both are very, very self-centered. They're both racist in a way. And only he could get away with such, and his hero is somewhat, I believe, like Said himself. He is an Arab who's trying to be assimilated in the Israeli society. And the scene we've seen is from the first episode, where he's going out. There are some block roads checking identities in Israel, or not in the main Israel, but in the borders. And they're passing such a block road, and he doesn't want to be perceived as Arab, so he's preparing his family. Now, they move from Arabic to Hebrew, which will be a bit hard for you to get, but trust me, this part is right.
And just before we play it, just to add on to that, he lies and cheats and tries to be Israeli very often, but his family...
Yes. So he makes the worst jokes about Arabs and Israelis. But as you know from watching the famous Seinfeld episode on the dentist Watley, who converted to Judaism in order to tell anti-Semitic jokes. So Said didn't have to do this. He can tell jokes about both Israelis and Arabs deservedly.
Let's watch it.
Okay. So this is dealing with the most, touchy subjects, but it laughs on everybody, and deservedly so.
One of the reasons this show actually won a lot of awards at the Israeli Yearly Awards is also the fact that a lot of it had a very broad appeal, and it didn't take sides.
Yeah, it had a very surprisingly, people didn't believe that a show that was 65% in this season, 70% Arabic, will be watched in Israeli primetime and be so successful. But when the storytelling is funny and compelling, and you identify with the people in the show, it just works.
Maybe we should go on, because the time is running out a bit. The next one is also it's also a show that's been quite critically acclaimed, but also edgy a thing like you'd say a big commercial station. How could you ever dream of putting such a show on? This is about. This is not a comedy.
Don't tell.
No. I'm just saying this is not a comedy.
No, it's not a comedy. It's a regular family, and they're having a very, very unique a boy, which is kind of a genius musician. And they take him to a
psychiatrist?
A psychiatrist to understand what's going on with him, because he's not usual. He's a genius, but he's not usual. They wanted to have this kind of diagnosis, what's going on with him. So this is the scene we're looking for.
It's a very serious show, but it's gone really well.
Really well. We are about to air in a few months the second season. And as you can imagine, the woman who's written it has an autistic child herself. She is so talented. She tells this story with such... with a combination of real sensitivity and humor, and this is something that resonated. And the amazing thing that happened after we aired it, it steered so much conversation and so much reaction in Israel about autism. And I can tell you personally that many people who work with me came forward and told me, I have an autistic child, and that happened after the show was aired. So reading the script, I can admit, the first time is about a family in the Negev. Their son is a music genius, but there's something in the micro writing. There's no big things in this show, nothing. It's dialogues, it's conversations, nothing big, but it's so deep and it resonates so far that's a unique voice.
Well, Avi, I'll get on to Homeland, because Homeland is really the thing that made Keshet very, very famous on the international television scene. It was adapted. It was an Israeli series, Prisoners of War, Hatufim, which was adapted to American television. Yeah. And it was one of a very successful adaptation. Yeah. Maybe we should just see a very quick clip from Homeland.
We're seeing we're seeing a short scene from Homeland where Brody is praying. He's in not his basement, in his garage praying. I don't know if you know this scene. Okay. Now, what we'll see now is the scene from our second season. This is the way our second season opened. Now, our hero has stayed in Syria. He didn't go back to Israel. And he converted to be a Muslim in Syria, and he's the head of a terror group fighting against Israel. So the thing is totally different, but something in the core of the voice of the show, something in the show about, for me, it's a show about loyalty and betrayal, and what it is, it's totally different, and the core, there's something the same. So this is the way we started our second season. This is taking in a mosque in Syria. This is our lead actor. This is our Damian Lewis. In our show, you don't know whether he's a real Muslim. It's the other way around. And you don't, this is the first time you see it, because through the whole first season you think he was killed in Syria.
Prisoners of War won a lot of awards in Israel, and definitely Homeland won a lot of Emmy Awards and Golden Globe Awards. And you're now pushing a lot of shows in the US, scripted shows, and unfortunately we don't have time to show a lot of the non-scripted shows. What I really want to touch on here at the ending is the way you work with creativity. You have a lot of creative people in-house in Keshet, and you told me yesterday that about half of all your non-scripted formats are developed in-house.
Yeah, yeah.
So, as opposed to a lot of other broadcasters, you're so focused on development in every layer of your organization.
If you would promise me fortune and ratings, it's not interesting. What is interesting is creating new shows and putting them on the air. So this is, again, talking psychology of a creative organization. Your creative ego has to be diverted to developing new shows and exciting things which you're proud of.
So I said to you yesterday, who are the kind of guys that you've hired in your creative department? And you said a lot of not so flattering words. You said, please go ahead.
No, all sorts. I will be more
restless.
It's not. I think the worst thing that can happen to an executive in the creative business is to be complacent, is to feel he's doing a great job. My job is to make all of us, especially myself, understand we're not doing that of a great job. Because if you feel you're doing a great job and you're complacent, you won't be listening hard enough, and you won't be looking for different voices and different things that you've done earlier. So this is kind of an oxymoron or contradiction in our work. Satisfied or not satisfied. I prefer never satisfied. So I think this is the main thing.
So if somebody's done a fantastic job, you say to them, your colleague is going to do a better job than you.
Because this is a technique used in advertising agencies where the creative teams compete. I think that the other thing is to say, okay, great job. What about the next episode? Let's do it. Look for other challenges, but you must harness your people to look at the achievements of the organization and see it as their achievements. It's not hard. It's not easy. It's very hard.
Finally, I hope we have time for maybe a few questions from it. One of the things I showed earlier on is how you expand, and you're opening offices in other countries. And you're having a lot of connections in Hollywood and many other places. Your philosophy is expanding beyond the borders of Israel, obviously, and Keshet International is pushing these things very hard. Why?
First thing is that in order to maintain creative energy, you have to move on. Now, on one hand, you have to be focused on your core competence, which is creativity. But on the other hand, if you are in a country, in a small country like Israel, it's very, very limited, economically and the rest. This is one reason. The other reason I would explain by using the next example of an adaptation, saying, in many, many cases, if you cannot control the adaptation, you don't have good examples like Homeland. You have examples like this one.
Should we see that one just quickly?
Yeah, this one is a traffic light, Ramzo.
Yes, it's about 3 men.
Okay, this is, just a minute, short introduction. Ramzo is a very, very successful comedy. It's going to its 4th season now in Israel in a few months. It's being written by a stand-up comedian. Again, our writers some of them are not professional TV writers. It's the first show he's ever written. Now, this guy, his stand-up routine is also concentrating, maybe Israelis, we have problems on this, the relationship of men and women. And his thesis is that women dominate the world, men are inferior creatures trying to bear with the women, but always fail. And this is one of the couples, and he's following few couples. This is one of the couples, and they will go to a marriage consultant, and the marriage consultant tell them, be different. Try to surprise your wife, and this is how he tries to surprise his wife. So this is our version. Now I'll show you, this is the marriage life of this couple, and I will show you a clip of the American series, which was on the air, but wasn't successful, unfortunately. In our show, she will never, ever apologize. Never. She's a woman, he's a man, he's inferior, no apologies. And when you take, and this is, Thomas, maybe this is the aspect, and this is a long answer to your question, it sometimes really gets lost in translation. And if you don't, and then you have the same plots, but you lose the resonance, you lose the voice. And this stand-up comedian's voice has this unique, stingy, not always pleasant insights about men and women and coupling. And if you lose it, it's gone.
Thank you very much. I think we're drawing to an end here. So all these people are either great producers or people working in broadcast. If you were to wrap up, one of the reasons Keshet is so successful, which advice would you give? If it's not something in the water, it's not the Iranian bomb, it's not the Yiddish mama, what is it? What advice would you give to people if you had to summarize the recipe that you're working and that you're leading your crew with?
It's hard. But because I'm in Denmark, and again, going back to Hamlet, I would say, it's not to be or not to be. You can be and be more at the same time. You can be both. You can be both successful commercially and pioneering creatively. You have to believe in this. You have to read a lot. Try to listen to what you read, and then it's to be, just to be. So don't choose. Don't choose. This would be my advice. You don't have to choose. If you're in the television business, choose both. That's it.
Are there any questions? Any last questions for Avi? You mean, do they see, are people differently creatively in other countries?
I think when referring to the golden age of television, which I referred in the beginning, I think it's for all countries. Looking at the most successful shows in American television these days, and for no coincidence, they're all cable shows. Shows like Breaking Bad, Mad Men, Homeland are shows that are dealing with complicated subjects. So I think this is something that's occurring throughout the world, not at the same pace, but people tuning in for a TV novel, not for a TV show, which is always derogatory for me, a TV show, this is American. I think this is a world phenomena. It's not only Israeli phenomena. Of course, we have our silly shows as well, but we didn't have to show some just candid camera silly shows, but okay.
Any last questions? In that case, Avi, I'd like to thank you very much for coming here. And
No, I like to thank you, Thomas, and thank you, Caroline, very much, and Dite,
yes,
and Taus. And it's really a real pleasure. I haven't been here for 30-something years, and it's a real delight, and thank you.
and your wife.